to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you are doing well and enjoying the podcast and this mini-series on protein. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date. Today, as I said, we'll be continuing the protein mini-series. The aim is to equip you with the knowledge to be able to make eating for health, weight loss and performance and life in general, enabling you to thrive, a lot easier, more enjoyable, and more sustainable. So let's get into today's episode. We will be covering, will protein help you lose weight, how much protein you need, and where is the best place to get your protein. So let's start from the beginning. Weight loss, hot topic. Will protein help you in losing weight? And we covered it on the last episode that protein is the most filling part or most filling nutrient of the three macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. It'll help with recovery from exercise, help with building and maintaining muscle mass, but also that hunger management, which is really, really a secret weapon when you're dieting. One of the other things that we can consider, or I might have touched on the last episode, is of the macronutrients when we're looking at protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Calories per gram, protein is 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates is also 4 calories per gram. Fat is 9 calories per gram. So when we're looking at foods that are high in protein, lower in fat, we might be getting a lot more volume or fillingness or fullness, I should say, from that food for less calories. And that's also something worth considering as well. So this is all well and good, but how does it pan out in the real world or even in the research? And I've got two really good studies here. The first one was around 350 people where they assigned them either a higher protein diet or a standard protein diet. And the standard protein diet was in line pretty much with the UK recommendations. And both groups were instructed to reduce their calories by 500 per day from their maintenance level. What they found after 12 months is that the higher protein group lost significantly more weight. The high protein group lost 12.4 pounds across 12 months, and the standard protein group lost 7.7 pounds, which is a huge difference. They also found that the high protein group lost more inches around their waist and lost more body fat from their body overall, which are all things that we're wanting to achieve. The second study was slightly different. They compared a high protein diet with a high fiber diet, and high fiber diets are fantastic, but this was just to see how it impacted weight loss when comparing the two. Again, both groups were asked to reduce their calories by 500 calories per day. When they looked at the results after 12 months again, they found that the high protein group lost 10.2 pounds versus the 7.6 pounds for the high fiber group. Both groups were compared with their waist as well and found that the high protein group lost more inches around their waist and more body fat overall. And I've often seen this with clients as well, that one of the biggest things that I can do or help them do is increase their protein intake in their diet. As I said, it'll help manage their hunger a bit better. But what we tend to see is that people manage dieting a lot easier. They tend to have less diet fatigue, we'd call it, where they feel less strained. They tend to recover from increased physical activity, which encourages them to do more. So it has a huge compounding effect. And people tend to see better results, especially reducing their waist circumferences, training improvements as well. So it's an easy win. And one of the first things that I go to a lot of my clients is trying to increase their protein intake. So we know increasing your protein intake is probably a great thing for weight loss, but how much do people need? When we look at protein, we often measure or have recommendations in relation to body size. This is because bigger people tend to need more protein. As we spoke about the processes in the body, it's not just to do with muscle mass, but to maintain their overall bodily functions and health. As I said in the previous part, is that the UK's reference or guidance is around 0.75 grams per kilogram of body weight, which doesn't actually equate to a huge amount. And in my opinion, and a lot of experts' opinion, should be a lot higher. So when I work with people, I tend to recommend to aim for probably double that per day, which can be a big change for people. So how we would work if I sit down with a client and once we've got sort of a measurement of them, got a food diary and we're looking through it, and they might be at 60 grams of protein per day, but realistically they might need to hit 120 grams. We'd look for easy wins of ways to potentially increase protein at breakfast, where people tend to struggle a lot more or don't tend to have any. We might have a look at portion sizes throughout the day, or if they're training and they want to try it, potentially have a look at some supplements alongside that. But easy wins and try to build it up in increments of 10 to 20 grams each time we move, rather than going, right, let's go from 60 grams to 120. Actually, let's get from 60 grams to 70 or 80 first of all, see how that goes. Try not to change too many things too quickly. There is also a point that people recommend or say that we should be aiming much higher than that at 2 grams per kilo. So, for example, if we've got a 100 kilogram person, the UK recommendations would be 75 grams of protein per day, which is equivalent to about 3 chicken breasts throughout the day, which I imagine a lot of people don't quite hit. For me personally, I'd probably suggest 1.5 grams per kilo, which again, if we're putting it just in chicken breast, but obviously we'd use a lot more variety in sauces, would be 5 to 6 throughout the day. But obviously we're getting that from dairy and things like that, so it wouldn't just be 5 to 6 chicken breasts throughout the day. 2 grams per kilo is a huge jump. That's 200 grams of protein per day. When I said most of the population probably aren't hitting the recommendations from the government anyway, which are on the lower end, that's why I probably suggest that most people is just about trying to get a little bit more in throughout the day, getting that extra 5 to 10 grams per meal to start with, seeing where we can get those easy wins. And vast majority of people will benefit from just getting 1 gram per kilo, 1.2 grams per kilo. But the main thing I'd suggest around this is that it's important to find a range or an amount of protein that is going to be beneficial, realistic, and sustainable for you. So that might not be towards 1.2 grams or 100, 120 grams of actual protein per day. It might just be moving from 60 to 80, can have huge health benefits. Yes, there might be more if we go a bit higher, but for a lot of people that might not be sustainable, it might not be affordable, it might not be realistic. So on the previous episode, I might have spoken about, or I did speak about, how spreading that protein across the day is beneficial as the body's constantly building up and breaking down in regards to protein sources within the body. This is why we suggest having it across 3 to 6 servings across the day. And that might sound like a lot of food, up to 6 servings, but by servings we mean meals and snacks. The 3 to 6 range that we'd use would be aiming for 25 or 40 grams of actually protein within that meal. And that seems to be a really good, if not optimal, target for most people. I know I'm speaking about a lot of grams here and kilograms, and if that's not your bag, if you don't know or want to get into that, in real life terms, that probably looks like 1 to 2 hand portions of lean meats, or would be 1 to 2 cups of a dairy source at each meal. Will have around that 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal. Yes, we want to include other sources in there. So if you've got legumes, if you've got carbohydrate sources in there, and you've got some vegetables, they'll all have smaller amounts of protein, and they can add up to be a significant amount as well. But the main source of our meal, the main focus of our meal, should probably be around that 1 to 2 hand portions of protein for you. So we've thrown a lot of numbers around there of 0.75 grams per kilo, 1.5 grams. If you're looking to lose weight, it's probably looking for higher amounts, the 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo. We'll cover some of the myths around those protein recommendations, around how much we can absorb, what potential detriments there might be to health long term, and whether there's any truth to that. But for my recommendations, aiming for 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo of body weight is a real good range for people wanting to manage their hunger a bit better and get really good weight loss results. So we know how much we should be eating, or we should be aiming for, but what foods are high in protein? So when we get into this, there's probably going to be some other topics we'll delve into on other episodes around this, go into a bit more detail. But in general, animal sources, or sources that come from animals like dairy and protein, fish, eggs, chicken, those tend to be the better protein sources. But this might change in the future, as we know sort of lab-made meats are making a huge difference and making huge steps forward with the protein quality, texture, and taste that may help with reducing the environmental impact as well, which we'll touch on in a second. I mentioned the last episode, but it's really important to reiterate that 100 grams of a high protein food doesn't mean that you're getting 100 grams of protein from that food. When we speak about a chicken breast, for example, 100 to 120 grams of actual raw weight will probably only have 25 grams of protein in there. And I say only, that's probably wrong from me, because that's a huge amount of protein within that serving. But that means that we've got about 100, if not 75 grams of that isn't protein. So it's understand that all foods are made up of different parts: the fats, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals go in there as well. So having a look at the protein amounts versus what the actual food volume amount is really important and can be a great learning curve for you. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to list off a few foods per 100 grams and how much protein they've got in them. So first of all, we'll start off with the animal sources, as they tend to be a bit higher, and people on the whole are probably finding those a bit more of a preference for them. So whey protein is a supplement, but also a part of food, and we'll discuss that in the following episode around myths around whey protein. But per 100 grams of whey, you're getting 80 to 95% of that being protein. So 80 to 95 grams per 100 grams. You probably wouldn't have 100 grams of whey in one go. Probably looking at a 30-gram serving of whey, which gets you about 25 grams of protein, which is still a good amount. Then if we're looking at beef, we're looking at 20, just over 30 grams of protein per 100 grams. Chicken's around 30 as well. If you're looking at pork, or like a pork sausage in particular, it's looking at 14 to 15 grams per serving, or per 100 grams, I should say. Eggs, so if you get 100 grams of eggs, you're only getting 13 grams of protein. Milk differs between 3 and 4 grams per 100 mils or 100 grams. And then Greek yogurt is ranging from 5 to 11 grams per 100 grams for protein. That depends on the fat content a lot. So if it's higher in fat, it tends to be lower in protein. Then if we're comparing that to protein sources that come from plants, soya, per 100 grams, you're getting 47 grams of protein, which is absolutely massive. But that tends to be the only one that can compare to animal sources. Pumpkin seeds comes up, and that's 19 grams, 100 grams. Peanuts are 100 grams of peanuts will get you 26 grams of protein, but peanuts actually are really high in fat in general, so that'll be a huge amount of calories. And that's another thing to consider as well, is that yes, it might be a good protein source, but what else is in there? And we know if something's going to be higher in fat, it's probably going to have a lot of calories in there as well. So is that worth it, getting that high protein for that more caloric dense food? A lot of the time, if we're looking to lose weight in particular, it probably isn't. Lentils per 100 grams are getting 18 grams of protein, and black beans, we are getting 24 grams of protein per 100 gram serving. So it's pretty varied in general. But when we are comparing animal sources versus plant sources, there's a lot of things to consider. There's ethics around it. It's what's nutritionally dense, potentially what's more environmentally friendly, financially available, what's available locally to you. So actually that probably deserves its own episode where we go into a deep dive looking at some of the facts and fiction around that. But in general, animal proteins tend to be better whole sources of protein. They tend to be rich in nutrients like B12 and heme iron. So when we're looking at the iron content, if we're comparing iron in animal sources versus plant-based sources, iron tends to be a lot higher in the animal sources, but also absorbed a lot better, which is really important. So when people tend to go into a vegetarian, vegan diet, iron can be a issue, and especially B12 for a lot of people. But animal sources can have higher saturated fat levels, which is something that we're trying to minimize. Looking at plant-based proteins, they are often incomplete proteins, and I touched on it in the previous episode around the amino acids in there. Some of them are essential. Animal sources tend to be more complete, and that means that they've got all the essential amino acids that our body can't produce by itself. However, plant sources don't, which means you have to be a lot smarter with your protein matching or your protein sources and how you make up a meal to ensure that the essential amino acids are sort of covered amongst them. They also tend to be lower in saturated fat, which is a benefit, and have huge benefits around increased fiber content, vitamins and minerals, variety. So there's a lot to consider. Not one is better than the other. It depends a lot on a lot of considerations there. But as always, and along with the sort of morals of this podcast, key is balance, to have a variety of protein sources that allow you to support you in your goals for optimal health, whatever you're trying to do with regards to performance and general well-being. So we've covered quite a lot there, but just to recap, will protein help you lose weight? In my opinion, yes, and my experience, yes, and the research supports that as well. So increasing your protein within your diet can have a huge impact if you're trying to lose weight. How much of it do you need? There's various recommendations. There's the government recommendations, which I believe are far too low, but there's a reason for that, with people not currently getting near that in the first place. Is moving that any higher going to help or hinder people eating more protein? The answer is probably not. And there's affordability, accessibility. I know currently economically, protein is the most expensive part of a meal. So again, we've got to consider that. But if you're looking to lose weight, increasing your protein towards that 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight can have a huge impact and have huge benefits to losing weight, managing your hunger, but also shown to help with waist circumference, reducing that and reducing overall body fat levels. And where are your best sources to get protein? There's so many that are listed, but we're looking at mainly poultry, we're looking at lean red meats, we're looking at fish, we're looking at eggs, and then the plant-based sources. We've got soya, we've got pumpkin seeds, lentils, black beans, dairy as well, which one of the ones I missed out. So there's plenty of there to include or increase the amounts of within your diet to get a more balanced diet. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Balanced Approach podcast and this mini series on protein. If you have any questions or queries and would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and all social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals, living a healthier, happier life, living a more balanced life, or having more balance in your approach to your nutrition, training, and overall lifestyle, click the link below and inquire about working with me. But for now, I enjoyed speaking to you today, and I'll speak to you on the next episode.